You ever had one of those mornings where the air feels too calm, the kind that warns you something ridiculous is about to happen? Well, that was me standing by my old wooden farm gate tightening the hinges when 3 police cruisers came, roaring down my dirt road like they were chasing an outlaw. Behind them, Karen in her pastel pink blazer phone in one hand, HOA clipboard in the other, shouting, "That gate is illegal, take it down." I blinked, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and thought, here we go again. The officers got out looking unsure while Karen strutted forward, finger pointed right at me. "Arrest him," she barked. I slowly reached into my back pocket, pulled out my golden badge, and said calmly, "Ma'am, you just called the sheriff on the sheriff. Before we dive into this wild story, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another crazy HOA showdown." I've lived on the same patch of land for over 20 years, a quiet, sun-soaked piece of the county just far enough from town that you could still hear the crickets at night. My father built this farmhouse with his bare hands back in the 70s, and the old oak out front has been there since before the Civil War. The dirt road leading up to my front gate, that's been a Whitaker road for 3 generations. My granddad used to say, as long as that gate swings, this family stands. Life out here used to be simple. Mornings started with the crow of a rooster and a cup of black coffee on the porch while the sun climbed over the fields. I'd feed the horses, check the fences, and drive into town for my shift at the sheriff's department. Nobody ever bothered me until the developers came. They called it Maple Ridge Estates. Nice-sounding name, isn't it? In reality, it was a swarm of identical beige houses crammed together on what used to be open pasture. And with those houses came the inevitable plague, an HOA. At first, I tried to be polite. I went to their little welcome barbecue, smiled at the board members, and even bought a slice of Karen Whitmore's lemon meringue pie. She was the new president, a middle-aged woman with sharp cheekbones, sharper opinions, and a voice that could pierce armor. The kind of person who believed clipboards were weapons. Karen ran the HOA like a military operation, except her battlefield was people's lawns. Within weeks, she'd already fined 2 families for leaving trash cans out too long, and told another to repaint their mailbox because the color was too rustic. I remember laughing with my wife Sarah about it one night. As long as she stays on her side of the fence, I said, we'll be just fine. I should have known better. One morning I was working near the gate replacing a post that had split during a storm. That's when Karen showed up in her silver SUV window, rolling down with that slow, deliberate hum like she was the Queen of England pulling up to inspect the peasants. "Morning," I said. She didn't smile. "Mr. Whitaker, we've had several complaints about this gate of yours." I blinked. "My gate, yes. It's positioned on what we believe to be HOA-managed land, part of the new community road. You'll need to move it back at least 20 feet to comply with neighborhood access standards." I almost laughed out loud. "Ma'am, this gate's been right here since before you were born. That road isn't part of your HOA, it's private property. Always has been." Her lips tightened. "We'll see about that. Our bylaws state," I held up my hand. "You can quote bylaws all you want, but county records beat your HOA binder any day." She didn't like that answer. Her eyes narrowed. "If you refuse to cooperate, we'll escalate." I shrugged. "Then escalate." She drove off, tires crunching on gravel, and I knew right then that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, odd things started happening. A letter showed up in my mailbox from the HOA Compliance Division, an official-looking document claiming I owed a $250 gate obstruction fine. A few days later, a notice of violation was pinned to my fence. Then one morning, I saw 2 men in reflective vests measuring the distance from my gate to the road, taking photos like they were preparing a crime report. I walked up, hands on my belt. "Can I help you boys?" one of them stammered. We're conducting a safety inspection." "For what road obstruction?" he said quickly, flipping through a clipboard. "Whose road?" I asked. Maple Ridge Estates." I pointed toward the county line marker, not 10 feet away. "That line right there, that's the end of Maple Ridge. Everything this side belongs to me. You're trespassing." The men looked at each other, clearly realizing they'd stepped into something bigger than they were paid for. Before they could leave, Karen's SUV appeared again like a hawk circling prey. "Gentlemen, continue your work," she commanded. Then turning to me, she smirked. "You can't threaten county workers, Mr. Whitaker." "They're not county," I replied. "I'd know. I signed their paychecks." Her expression flickered with confusion for a moment, then settled into that smug smile again. "Well, we'll just have to settle this with law enforcement." I folded my arms. Good idea. I didn't bother telling her that law enforcement in this county ultimately reported to me. Sometimes silence is the best setup for justice. A week later, I started noticing HOA members driving by slowly, phones out, filming my gate. Sarah said, "They're trying to bait you." I told her I wasn't worried. Let them dig their own hole. Still, there was something unsettling about how organized Karen was. She'd send group emails, newsletters, even a Facebook post calling me a non-compliant neighbor endangering public access. I got calls from friends in town laughing, asking John, "What'd you do this time?" The funny part was I hadn't done a thing. I just owned land that Karen couldn't control, and that drove her mad. One afternoon while Sarah was watering the garden, Karen marched right up to the fence line again. "We've reviewed the plats," she declared. "The gate violates HOA access regulations." I looked her dead in the eye. "Karen, the county records office would disagree. And you're standing on private property. Private. We'll see about that," she hissed, then turned to her assistant, a nervous young man carrying another clipboard. "Take a photo of this obstruction." That was it. I leaned forward and said quietly, "Touch that gate, and you'll be explaining yourself to the sheriff's department." Karen snorted. "Oh, please. Like you know any sheriff personally." I smiled just a little. "Closer than you think." She stomped back to her SUV, muttering something about filing a formal complaint. I didn't even bother stopping her. Let her call whoever she wanted. I had all the paperwork, the deeds, and the surveyor maps framed neatly in my study, proof the land was mine, clear as daylight. But here's the thing about people like Karen, they don't lose gracefully. The more you prove them wrong, the louder they get. Over the next few days, I saw her meeting with board members in front of her house, waving around folders, pointing toward my property, like she was planning a military invasion. I told Sarah she's gearing up for something. Sarah sighed. "Can't you just tell her who you are?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want her to dig deep enough that she can't climb back out." That night, as the crickets chirped and the moonlight hit the fields, I sat on my porch sipping coffee, watching the quiet road that led to my gate. It was peaceful, but I knew peace never lasts long when an HOA president decides to declare war. And true enough, it wouldn't be long before blue lights flashed on that same dirt road and Karen would learn the hardest lesson of her life: some gates aren't meant to be crossed. 2 days after that last confrontation, I woke up to the sound of voices outside my window, not the kind of voices you want to hear before your first cup of coffee. I looked out and saw 2 men in orange vests standing near my fence, talking to each other while one of them filmed with his phone. Behind them, a white SUV with the Maple Ridge HOA logo sat idling on the shoulder of the road. I opened my door and called out, "Morning, fellas, you lost." The older one smiled nervously. Just doing an inspection, sir." "Inspection of what?" I asked. "Safety check on access structures," he said quickly, as if reading from a script. I stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel. "That so? Who authorized it?" He looked toward the SUV, and sure enough, the driver's door opened. Out stepped Karen Whitmore, pastel suit, sunglasses, and that trademark smirk like she'd just won a prize at the fair. "Good morning, Mr. Whitaker," she sang. "We're here to ensure community safety. Your gate poses a potential hazard to emergency access routes." I crossed my arms. "Emergency access, Karen, this road ends at my barn. The only emergency vehicles coming here are mine." She ignored me and turned to the inspectors. "Go ahead and take the measurements, gentlemen." The younger man started to lift a tape measure, but I stopped him. "Son, before you take another step, you'd better tell me who you work for." He froze. Karen spoke up sharply. "They're with our compliance team." "So not the county," I said flatly. "This road serves the community," she said. "By HOA regulations, all access points must meet code." "Karen," I said slowly, "this road isn't part of your HOA. It's a private easement recorded in 1971. You have no authority here." She rolled her eyes. "We'll see what the survey says." I could have ended it right there, flashed my badge and scared her off for good. But there's something satisfying about watching arrogance walk itself into a trap, so instead I smiled. "Go ahead, do your inspection. Just make sure you get my good side in the report." Karen's brow furrowed, not quite sure whether I was mocking her, which I was. She left soon after barking orders into her phone. The inspectors quickly packed up clearly, realizing they'd been used for something shady. By evening, Sarah came into the kitchen holding a letter. "You've got another one from the HOA." I sighed. "Let me guess, another fine, worse," she said. "They want you to attend a hearing." Sure enough, the letter accused me of endangering public safety by obstructing a communal road. It even included photos, grainy, zoomed-in shots of my gate from that morning. They'd added red circles and arrows like some kind of conspiracy board. I couldn't help but laugh. They're getting desperate. Sarah frowned. "This is harassment, John." "Yep," I said. "And harassment leaves evidence." That night, I set up my security cameras, one pointed at the road, one at the gate, and one catching the approach from the woods. If Karen wanted to play spy games, I was ready to record every move she made. 2 mornings later, she struck again. This time, she brought reinforcements, 3 HOA board members, and a man in a cheap suit carrying a clipboard. I was feeding the horses when I saw them marching down the road like they owned it. The man in the suit stepped forward. "Sir, I'm with County Code Enforcement. We've received complaints about your gate's placement and condition. Do you have a warrant or an inspection order?" I asked. He hesitated. "We're doing a courtesy visit." I smiled thinly. "Courtesy doesn't require trespassing." "Step back off my property," Karen piped up. "You can't stop a county officer from doing his job." I turned to the man. "What's your name?" Todd," he said, eyes darting toward her. "All right, Todd," I said calmly. "Why don't you give me your badge number and department?" He hesitated again, then mumbled, "I'm contracted through the HOA for preliminary assessments." I laughed out loud. "So you're not county. You're a private consultant." Karen's face flushed red. "He's qualified. Qualified to what I asked. Play dress up and hold a clipboard." She stepped forward until her heels sank slightly into the dirt. "You're being very hostile, Mr. Whitaker. This could go on your record." I smiled, leaning slightly closer. "Karen, you have no idea what my record is." For the first time, she hesitated. Then she turned sharply toward her people. "Fine. Document the obstruction. We'll escalate through official channels." As they left, Sarah came out from the porch, shaking her head. "You really shouldn't toy with her." "Oh, I'm not toying," I said. "I'm teaching." That evening, I called my friend Marcus, the deputy who managed our department's property records. "Marcus, I need you to pull the original plats for the Whitaker property line and the adjoining HOA parcel." He chuckled. "Karen's still at it, huh?" "You have no idea," I said. "She's building a case out of thin air." "All right," he said. "I'll send over the documents." "But John, you know you can just flash your badge and end this right." "Not yet," I replied. "Let her believe she's winning. The higher she climbs, the funnier the fall." Over the next week, Karen ramped up her campaign. Flyers appeared on neighborhood mailboxes warning of illegal obstructions. She even went on the HOA's Facebook page posting pictures of my gate with the caption, "A danger to community access and emergency response under review." The comment section was pure chaos. Half the neighbors agreed with her. The other half roasted her for overstepping. My favorite comment read, "Karen, it's a farm gate, not Fort Knox." Then came the real kicker. A certified letter claiming she'd scheduled a mandatory removal date for my gate pending police assistance. That line made me laugh out loud. She wasn't bluffing this time. She was going to call in actual law enforcement to enforce a fake HOA order. Sarah frowned as I read it. "You're really going to let her do that?" "Yep," I said. "And I'm going to make sure the cameras are rolling when she does." I spent that night quietly checking the lenses, clearing the driveway, and making sure my uniform, the real one with the gold star and nameplate, was pressed and ready in my truck. Because if Karen wanted to call the cops, well, the cops were about to answer. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that makes everything shine a little brighter. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I saw her silver SUV creeping up the road, followed by 3 black and white police cruisers. My lips curved into a grin. Sarah came to the doorway. "You planned this, didn't you? Let's just say I'm ready for my close-up," I said. Karen stepped out first, wearing that smug grin like she'd finally conquered the world. She pointed toward my gate dramatically. "There it is, officers. That's the obstruction I told you about." One of the younger officers scratched his head, looking confused. "Ma'am, this is private property. Not for long," she interrupted. "It's part of our community road. Remove it." The officer sighed and turned toward me. "Sir, could we talk for a moment?" "Of course," I said, setting down my mug. I walked up calmly, watching Karen's triumphant smirk as she whispered something about finally putting him in his place. Then, with all the patience of a man who's seen every kind of nonsense the county can produce, I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my badge, and let it catch the sunlight. The young officer froze. "Sheriff Whitaker." Karen blinked. "Wait, I smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am. You just called the sheriff's department to enforce your HOA rules against the sheriff." The silence that followed was pure gold. Karen's face went from crimson to ghost white. The officers glanced at each other, half embarrassed, half amused. Sarah leaned on the porch railing, trying not to laugh. I tucked my badge back into my belt and said softly, "Now why don't we talk about this inspection you've been running?" And that right there was when the tables began to turn. You could have heard a pin drop on that gravel road. 3 squad cars idled with their engines, humming exhaust, curling lazily into the morning air. The birds had stopped chirping. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Karen stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, clutching her clipboard like it was a holy relic. The younger officer who had just called me sheriff looked like he wanted to evaporate into thin air. I gave him a small nod. "Relax, son. You didn't do anything wrong." He swallowed hard. Sheriff Whitaker, sir, we were responding to a false complaint, I finished. I'm well aware. Go on, finish your report, and then we'll sort this out properly. Karen finally found her voice. Wait, no, this can't be right. You're not the sheriff. You're a farmer, I smiled. Both can be true, ma'am. I reached into my truck, pulled out my uniform jacket, and slipped it on. The gold star gleamed under the Sunday. Now, what seems to be the problem with my own gate on my own land? The officers looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or salute. The senior one, Sergeant Gomez, stepped forward. He'd worked under me for years. Sheriff, we got a dispatch call claiming a community obstruction to emergency access. The HOA president here said she had county authorization to remove this gate. I nodded slowly, then turned to Karen. County authorization, huh? You mind showing me the paperwork? She hesitated, riffling through her folder. I don't have it with me, but it was filed. With whom I interrupted. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The community committee. I raised an eyebrow. The committee isn't a legal authority, Mrs. Whitmore. Filing complaints with your HOA doesn't magically make them county orders. Gomez stifled a grin. One of the younger officers whispered something under his breath that sounded a lot like, oh man, she's done for. Karen took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. Look, Sheriff, Mr. Whitaker, whatever you are, this is a misunderstanding. I was only following procedure. The community needs this access road open. I pointed toward the wooden sign at the start of the road, weathered but clear as daylight, Whitaker Ranch, private property. That's been here since 1971. You can check the survey records. The access road belongs to me, not the HOA. You don't get to decide what stays or goes on it. Her face flushed bright red. But people drive through here. Without permission, I said evenly, which is called trespassing. One of the younger officers tried to hide his laugh behind a cough. Karen glared at him, then spun back to me. You're abusing your authority, I tilted my head. I wasn't even using it. But if I were abusing it, you'd already be in handcuffs for filing a false police report. Do you really want to test how far we take this today? That shut her up for a moment. Sarah came walking down the driveway, calm as ever, holding her coffee mug. Everything okay out here? She asked sweetly. Just handling another HOA emergency, I said. Apparently our century-old gate is a threat to public safety. Sarah looked at Karen, her tone polite but cutting. Is that so funny I didn't see the HOA here when the flood washed out half the main road last year? Karen's eyes darted to the officers as if begging them to rescue her. We can resolve this civilly, she said, finally trying to sound composed. I agree, I said. Let's resolve it by following the law. I turned to Gomez. Sergeant, please pull up the county parcel map for this area. He nodded and tapped on his tablet. Within seconds, the digital map came up, showing boundary lines. Here it is. Lot 42 Amperes Whitaker Ranch. Private easement recorded 1,971, renewed 2005. The HOA boundary stops 40 yards before the gate. Karen stared at the map like it was written in another language. That can't be right. It's official county data, Gomez said, cross-referenced with the land registry. There's no mistake. I folded my arms. So, Mrs. Whitmore, unless you have another version of reality you'd like to submit to the courts, I suggest you stop wasting police resources. Her jaw trembled with fury. You think you're so clever, don't you? You can't hide behind that badge forever. I'll have this reported to the state board, I chuckled. Go ahead, I'm on that board. For a split second, the look on her face was worth every headache she'd caused me. The officers started walking back toward their cars, chuckling under their breath. Gomez gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. You good here, Sheriff, I'm good. Go ahead and clear the call, I said. As they drove off, Karen stood there trembling, partly from rage, partly from humiliation. The neighbors across the road had gathered at their mailboxes, pretending to check the mail, but everyone was watching. I looked at her one last time. You might want to be careful, Karen. Filing false police reports can get you in serious trouble, especially when you do it to the sheriff. She didn't reply. She just spun on her heel and stormed off her SUV tires, spitting gravel as she sped away. Sarah came up beside me, shaking her head. You know she's not done right. Oh, I'm counting on it, I said. People like her don't stop until they've embarrassed themselves completely. That night, as the crickets sang outside and the porch light cast a soft glow over the gate, I replayed the day in my head. She'd tried to use the system against me, but the system was mine. Still, I knew better than to relax. HOA Karens don't take defeat well. They retreat, regroup, and come back with double the drama. Sure enough, the next morning I woke up to find a bright orange paper pinned to the gate. Final notice. Immediate removal required. Sarah groaned. She actually printed another one, I laughed. Persistence is admirable. Stupidity is not. Later that day, I started getting emails from neighbors. Screenshots of HOA announcements claiming that unauthorized individuals were interfering with community safety standards. Karen had twisted the story, making it sound like I was the one who'd harassed the officers. The cherry on top, a photo of my gate on the community's Facebook page with the caption, "Sheriff or not, rules are rules." That's when I knew she wasn't just angry. She was plotting. I spent the next few evenings reviewing footage from my cameras. I could see her car drive by the property several times, headlights sweeping across the gate, pausing as if she were inspecting it. By the third night, she started showing up on foot, just after midnight, walking along the fence with a flashlight, checking the hinges, measuring, taking photos. "Sarah," I said, watching the footage, "she's escalating. What are you going to do? Document everything I said, every single step, because in my line of work, evidence speaks louder than arrogance." The next morning, I stopped by the county clerk's office to retrieve certified copies of the land deeds. I wanted them stamped, notarized, and ready. The clerk, an older woman named Patty who'd known me for years, smiled when she saw the forms. "Karen trouble?" she asked. "You could say that." She shook her head. "That woman's been here 3 times this week asking for maps. Each time she leaves red-faced." I grinned. Perfect. Paper trail's already building itself. By the time I got home, a fresh letter waited in my mailbox, another summons to appear before the HOA board for violations. Sarah sighed. "It's like she wants to go to war." I folded the letter neatly and set it aside. "Then we'll give her one, just not the kind she expects." That night I called Gomez again. "Hey, next time she calls dispatch about me, don't stop her. Let her make the call, log it officially. I want this all on record." He laughed. "You're setting her up, huh?" "Not setting her up," I said calmly. "Just letting her walk into her own consequences. Because when people like Karen think they're untouchable, justice doesn't have to chase them, it just waits for them to show up and confess with a smile. And judging by how desperate she looked the last time I saw her, I knew it wouldn't be long before she did something spectacularly stupid." By the time the weekend rolled around, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Word had spread fast that the sheriff himself was caught in an HOA dispute, and depending on which gossip chain you listened to, I was either a lawless tyrant or a national hero. Personally, I didn't mind either version, both made Karen look ridiculous. That Saturday morning, I decided to take advantage of the attention. I set up a big sign next to my gate that read, "Private easement, no HOA jurisdiction." Below it, I taped copies of the county deed and survey plat for everyone to see. Nothing shuts down rumors like paperwork. By noon, a few curious neighbors stopped by. Some of them apologized for ever siding with Karen. Others confessed they were sick of her micromanaging everything from mailbox colors to the length of their grass. One woman whispered, "You have no idea how many people in Maple Ridge wish someone would finally stand up to her." "Oh, I've got an idea," I said with a smile, "and I plan on standing tall." Karen must have heard the chatter because by that evening her silver SUV was crawling down my road again. She parked right at the line of my property and got out with 2 board members in tow, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Whitaker," she began loud enough for everyone within 100 feet to hear, "your little sign violates visual harmony standards under HOA guidelines section." I held up my hand. "Karen, I'm not under your HOA. None of this property is." She ignored me, waving her folder in the air. "You are setting a dangerous precedent for the entire community. You can't just do whatever you want because you wear a badge." "Actually," I said calmly, "I can do whatever I want on my land because that's how property rights work. The badge has nothing to do with it." She took a step closer, finger stabbing the air. "You think the law doesn't apply to you, Sheriff? That's abuse of power," I chuckled. "You want to talk about abuse of power, ma'am? Let's talk about you forging inspection notices and sending unlicensed contractors onto private property." Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." I turned toward the crowd that had gathered near the road, half the HOA by the look of it. "You'll all be interested to know," I said, raising my voice, "that I have full video footage of Mrs. Whitmore's so-called inspectors trespassing on my land, measuring and photographing without a warrant or consent." Murmurs rippled through the group. One man in the back muttered, "That's illegal, isn't it?" "Oh, it's more than illegal," I said. "It's harassment. And if they touch so much as a hinge on that gate, it's vandalism." Karen's hands trembled slightly. "You wouldn't." "I would." I interrupted, "and I will." That was when the second wave hit the paperwork. I'd spent the last few days collecting certified records, time-stamped emails, even screenshots of her Facebook rants accusing me of endangering the community. Every bit of it a neat stack inside a folder marked Exhibit A. I held it out toward her. This is a formal cease and desist. Any further interference with my property will be treated as criminal trespass. And since you called in a false police report last week, that's already one strike. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Nobody wanted to side with her now. Even her board members looked ready to quit. She turned to them, voice trembling but still defiant. Don't just stand there. He can't threaten us. The HOA has rights too. One of them, an older man named Frank, finally spoke. Karen, he's literally the sheriff. Maybe we should back off. Back off, she screeched. He's mocking our authority, I smirked. You're confusing authority with control, ma'am. There's a difference. You can't fine people into submission out here. This isn't your cul-de-sac. The laughter from the neighbors broke the tension for a moment. Karen spun around, glaring at them all like a teacher scolding children. But this time nobody looked away. The spell of fear she'd cast over the neighborhood had cracked wide open. Still, I wasn't done. I'd been waiting for the right moment to twist the knife legally, of course. By the way, I added, since you seem so concerned about safety, I did a little checking on your HOA's permit status. Her head snapped toward me. What? Turns out Maple Ridge Estates never filed for a road maintenance license with the county. Which means that little gravel road you've been claiming is yours. I pointed behind her. It's not even zoned for public use. Technically, every time your members drive past my gate, they're trespassing too. Her eyes widened in horror. That's not true. I reached into my folder and pulled out the document, the county seal gleaming on top. It's public record, Mrs. Whitmore. You're welcome to verify it yourself. Oh wait, you already did. The clerk told me you've been in there 3 times this week trying to correct the file. The color drained from her face completely. I leaned closer, voice calm but firm. You've been trying to rewrite property lines, call in false police reports, and harass a law enforcement officer on his own land. If I were anyone else, you'd already be sitting in a holding cell waiting for your attorney. She backed up a step, stammering. You can't talk to me like that. I just did, I said. And if you want, I can make it official. Sarah, standing at the porch with her arms crossed, added dryly, You should probably stop digging, Karen. You're already halfway to China. For once, Karen had no comeback. She turned, muttering something about lawyers, and appeals, then stormed back to her SUV. The board members followed like defeated soldiers, their shoulders slumped. As the engine roared to life, the crowd slowly dispersed, whispering to each other. A few neighbors clapped. One even shouted, Finally someone shut her up. I couldn't help but grin. All in a day's work. But I knew Karen wasn't finished. The way she sped off, tires screeching, told me she was too proud to quit. And pride mixed with humiliation, that's a dangerous cocktail. Sure enough, 2 days later, the retaliation began. It started. Small flyers slipped under mailboxes, claiming I was under investigation for misuse of authority. Then came the anonymous phone calls to the station. Concerned citizens questioning whether the sheriff should be allowed to own private land near the HOA boundary. My deputies knew better, of course. They laughed it off, but it irritated me how persistent she was. She wasn't just trying to win, she wanted to ruin me. Then one morning, Sarah came running into my office holding her phone. John, you need to see this. It was a video. Posted to the Maple Ridge community page. Grainy zoomed in, clearly shot from a phone of me locking the farm gate. Karen's voice narrated off-screen. Here you can see the sheriff obstructing a public roadway. Proof of corruption and abuse. It had dozens of comments already, mostly mocking her, but a few siding with her story. I sighed. She's getting desperate. Sarah frowned. You can't just let her slander you like this. I won't, I said. But I'm not going to fight her online. I'll let her hang herself with her own rope. That night I reviewed all the security footage again, labeling each file carefully. At 1:14 p.m. one clip caught my attention. Headlights stopping near the gate, 2 figures stepping out, flashlights moving, then metal clinking. One of them wore a pink blazer. I zoomed in and froze the frame. Karen. I smiled. There it is. Sarah leaned over my shoulder. She's actually trying to take the gate apart. Yep, I said, clicking save. And that, my dear, is called evidence of intent. I made one call before going to bed to dispatch. Hey, it's Whitaker. Next time a certain HOA president decides to visit my property after midnight, I want a patrol car ready. We'll catch this one red-handed. Because in this county, justice doesn't always knock politely. Sometimes it waits behind a gate. By Monday morning, the storm had officially begun. Karen's pride had taken a public beating, and she was determined to claw back whatever control she thought she'd lost. The HOA newsletter hit every mailbox in Maple Ridge Estates, and right there on page 1 was a bold headline in capital letters, Community Safety Alert Unauthorized Structure Under Investigation. Beneath it was a blurry photo of my gate, along with a paragraph accusing me by name of creating unnecessary risk for emergency responders and impeding community access. I couldn't help but laugh when Sarah read it out loud. "She actually put your name in print," she said. "Oh, that's good," I replied. "That means she just made it actionable." See, Karen wasn't just petty, she was sloppy. The HOA newsletter wasn't a private email anymore, it was distributed to over 100 households, making it public defamation. And that, to a sheriff, was a gift-wrapped legal opportunity. But Karen wasn't finished there. She doubled down. The next day I found bright yellow stakes hammered into the ground near my property line, each with a little HOA tag fluttering in the breeze. New community access point, under construction. I rubbed my temples. You've got to be kidding me. Sarah came out of the barn, arms crossed. "She's building her own road now, apparently," I said. "And she's doing it on county-protected wetland." Sure enough, when I checked the county maps later that afternoon, the area she was digging into was listed as a drainage protection zone. Any alteration without a permit could bring a fine in the thousands. Now, I could have gone over there right away and shut it down, badge blazing, voice booming. But I wanted this to be airtight. So instead, I called my old friend Marcus again. "Hey, you remember those property plats you sent me?" "Yeah," he said. "Why, Karen, strike again. She's trying to excavate land that doesn't belong to her or to anyone, technically. It's county drainage." Marcus laughed. "You want me to pull the environmental violation codes? Already on my desk," I said. "But what I really want is for the county inspector to stop by, unannounced." 2 days later, that's exactly what happened. At around 10 a.m., I saw a white county pickup truck pull up by the so-called construction site. 2 inspectors got out with clipboards, and within minutes they were measuring, photographing, and shaking their heads. Karen arrived soon, after all smiles, thinking they were there to approve her project. When she realized who they were really working for, her face drained of color faster than fresh paint in a rainstorm. From my porch I could hear the conversation. "What do you mean unauthorized activity?" she demanded. One of the inspectors replied, "Ma'am, you've broken at least 3 environmental protection ordinances by digging into a drainage easement. We're going to need you to cease operations immediately," Karen stammered. "But this is HOA property." The inspector pointed toward the culvert. "No, ma'am, this belongs to the county. You're in violation." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. By noon, the inspector's truck had left, leaving behind bright red stop work order signs hammered into the ground. And just like that, Karen's little retaliation project turned into an official investigation. But she didn't take defeat quietly. That evening, I received a barrage of emails. HOA complaints, community concerns, even an anonymous message threatening to expose me to the press. Sarah read over my shoulder and snorted. "Expose you for what? Owning a fence? Apparently that's a federal crime in HOA land," I said. Still, I decided to stay cautious. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. When people like her get humiliated, they either retreat or self-destruct, and I had a feeling she'd choose the latter. Sure enough, that night she made her biggest mistake yet, around 1:30 p.m. My phone buzzed a motion alert from my security cameras. The monitor showed 2 figures creeping along the fence line. One was clearly Karen, identifiable by that pink blazer even in night vision. The other was her vice president, a lanky guy named Dennis holding a flashlight and a power drill. Sarah, half asleep, asked, "Is that her again?" "Yep," I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket, and she just crossed the line from harassment to felony. I radioed dispatch. "Unit 12, this is Sheriff Whitaker. I've got 2 trespassers on private property in progress at Whitaker Ranch. Send a patrol car to back me up." The dispatcher replied immediately. "Copy that, Sheriff. Units en route." I switched to the live camera feed again. Karen and Dennis were at the gate now, crouched low, trying to unscrew the hinge bolts. The camera's microphone caught her whispering, "If we just take it down tonight, he'll have to replace it with a compliant gate. HOA law is HOA law." I couldn't help but grin. "Gotcha," I muttered. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, I could already hear the distant hum of engines, 2 patrol cars coming fast. The headlights swept over the field, catching Karen mid-turn, her eyes wide like a deer in the spotlight. "Evening, Mrs. Whitmore," I called out, stepping into the beam of her flashlight. Working late, she froze drill still in her hand. Dennis dropped his flashlight entirely. "Sheriff, we were just committing vandalism on private property," I finished. "Yeah, I can see that." The patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing red and blue across the field. The sight was downright cinematic, 2 officers stepping out, one with a body cam rolling. Karen started talking fast. "This is all a misunderstanding. We were performing an inspection. An HOA safety inspection. I raised an eyebrow. At midnight, with power tools, her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like she wanted to sink into the dirt. "Ma'am," one of the officers said carefully, "we have you on video attempting to dismantle a locked gate on private property. That's vandalism and trespassing." Karen stammered. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." The officer looked at me. "Sheriff, you want to handle this?" I took a step forward, folding my arms. "No, let protocol stand. Process them both like any other suspects. Make sure the footage is saved to evidence." Dennis groaned. "Karen, I told you this was a bad idea," she snapped. "Shut up, Dennis." The officer gently took her wrist to cuff her. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." Karen tried to pull away, eyes wide with panic. "You can't do this. I'm part of the community leadership, and I'm part of county law enforcement," I said flatly. "Difference is mine actually means something." When the cuffs clicked shut, she finally stopped struggling. The red and blue lights flickered against her face, and for the first time the self-proclaimed Queen of Maple Ridge looked small, powerless. The officers guided her to the patrol car. Neighbors' lights flicked on up and down the road, curtains parted, phones came out to record. The whole community watched as their HOA president was led away in handcuffs from the very gate she'd tried to destroy. I stood there quietly, the night air cool, and still the scene surreal, even for me. Sarah walked up behind me, slipping her arm through mine. "You got her good this time," she whispered. "Didn't have to get her," I said softly. "She got herself." As the patrol cars drove off, taillights fading into the dark, I looked up at the old wooden gate still standing, a little scratched but unbroken. It wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a lesson in pride, arrogance, and consequences. And though the night had gone quiet again, I knew this wasn't the end. There'd be fallout hearings, statements to give, but that was fine. Justice didn't rush it, just waited for the right time to close the gate. When the patrol cars disappeared down the dark county road with their sirens off and their blue lights still pulsing faintly in the trees, I stood there for a long minute, listening to the frogs croaking by the creek and the metallic tick of my gate settling back into stillness. Sarah touched my shoulder and said softly, "Well, that's one way to end an HOA meeting." I gave a tired chuckle, still watching the dust settle on the headlights trail. "Yeah, but I have a feeling the meeting isn't quite over yet. Because people like Karen never accepted defeat, they just postponed it until morning." By sunrise, the entire community knew. Videos had already hit social media before the officers even finished booking her at county lockup. One neighbor had caught the whole scene from her upstairs window, complete with the red and blue lights painting Karen's pink blazer like a circus act. The clip was captioned, "HOA President Caught Breaking into Sheriff's Property." It had thousands of views before breakfast. When I arrived at the sheriff's office later that morning, the dispatcher looked up from her desk trying not to grin. "Rough night, boss," I shrugged. "Just another trespass call." "Yeah," she said, suppressing a laugh. "Except this one's trending on Facebook." Inside the holding area, Karen sat in a chair, hands clasped, staring at the floor. Her blazer was gone, replaced by a gray county-issue sweater. Her lipstick had faded, her hair slightly frizzed from the humidity. Gone was the self-appointed Queen of Maple Ridge. What sat there was just another angry, embarrassed neighbor who'd pushed too far. When she saw me, her eyes flickered with a mix of fury and humiliation. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I leaned against the doorway. "No, ma'am, I don't enjoy arresting people. But I do appreciate when justice saves me the paperwork." She glared. "You humiliated me in front of the entire community." I crossed my arms. "You humiliated yourself the moment you thought HOA bylaws trumped state law." Karen stood abruptly, her voice trembling. "You set me up. You provoked me, Karen," I said calmly. "I warned you. More than once. You kept escalating. You brought this on yourself." She turned away, muttering. "This isn't over." I sighed. "I know. But after the charges are processed, you'll have plenty of time to think about when to quit." Later that day, she was formally charged with trespassing, attempted vandalism, and filing a false police report. Nothing major. She wouldn't see prison, but enough to stain her spotless HOA reputation. That afternoon, I walked back through the neighborhood, and something strange happened. People started smiling at me. Not the forced, polite kind of smile they used to give when Karen was around, but real, relieved smiles. A few folks even stopped to shake my hand. One man, a retired teacher named Alan, said, "Sheriff, I just want to thank you. That woman's been terrorizing us for years. You've done more for this neighborhood in one night than the board did in a decade." Another neighbor whispered, "We wanted to speak up, but she threatened to fine us. You finally gave everyone the courage to stand up." I didn't say much. I just nodded and tipped my hat. But deep down, I felt something heavy, lift a quiet kind of justice that didn't come from badges or titles, but from balance being restored. The next morning I got a call from county court. Karen's lawyer wanted to negotiate a settlement before her hearing. I almost laughed when the clerk said she wanted to resolve things amicably. When I arrived, she was sitting beside her lawyer, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The pink blazer had been replaced with a beige cardigan. No clipboard, no smug grin. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Sheriff Whitaker, my client would like to make a statement." Karen looked up at me. I went too far. I let things get personal. I thought I was protecting the community, but I crossed lines. I studied her for a moment. "And the gate." She hesitated. "You were right. It's yours. Always was." "Good," I said. "Maybe now we can get back to being neighbors instead of adversaries." Her lawyer leaned in. "We'd like to request that the charges be dropped in exchange for community service and a formal apology." I thought about it. I could have insisted on a full conviction, could have made her squirm for every ounce of arrogance she'd thrown my way, but I also knew something Karen didn't. Humiliation was already punishment enough. "Fine," I said finally. "Drop the fines, drop the fake violations, and make sure every homeowner she harassed gets a written apology. Then I'll sign off." Karen nodded stiffly. "Deal." As I turned to leave, I added, "Oh, and one more thing, you might want to resign from the HOA presidency, for everyone's sake." She didn't answer, but the silence said enough. The story didn't end there, though. Within a week, the HOA board held an emergency vote and removed Karen from her position. The vice president resigned too, probably from embarrassment, after being caught holding a flashlight during the break-in. A new interim president took over, a level-headed woman named Janet, who immediately started undoing half the nonsense Karen had enforced. No more fines for lawn colors. No more threats over mailbox heights. No more HOA patrols sneaking around people's fences. The whole place felt lighter, freer, almost like a real neighborhood again. One Saturday morning I was mending a section of fence when Janet stopped by with a folder. "Sheriff," she said, smiling politely, "the board wanted to deliver this in person." I opened it. Inside was a printed letter, stamped with the HOA seal, formal apology. "The Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association hereby acknowledges that the actions taken against Sheriff John Whitaker were based on misinformation overreach and improper enforcement of community bylaws. We regret any harm, stress, or inconvenience caused, and extend our sincerest apologies for the misconduct of our former president, Mrs. Karen Whitmore." At the bottom, in careful handwriting, was Karen's signature. Janet smiled awkwardly. She insisted on writing it herself. I laughed softly. "Well, that's progress." She nodded. "We're trying to make this place right again. I think people finally realized what real authority looks like." That night, Sarah and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the horizon in gold. The air smelled of honeysuckle and cedar, the kind of calm that used to be normal before all the HOA madness. She nudged me. "You could have pressed harder, you know. Made her pay more." "Maybe," I said. "But then I'd be just like her, using power because I can, not because it's right." Sarah smiled. "That's why you wear the badge." I looked out at the gate, still standing strong against the fading light. "No," I said quietly. "That's why I built the gate in the first place." Later that week, as part of her community service, Karen had to repaint the fence she'd damaged. She showed up early in the morning with a paint bucket and gloves, trying not to make eye contact. I stood by the porch with my coffee and gave her a polite nod. She hesitated, then said softly, "For what it's worth, Sheriff, I was wrong about you." I smiled faintly. "You were wrong about a lot of people, Karen. Maybe this will help you get it right next time." She nodded and went back to painting, and for the first time I saw her quiet, not angry, not defensive, just human. By sunset, the fence gleamed a perfect shade of chestnut, the same color my father used when he first built it 50 years ago. When she packed up her brushes, she said almost in a whisper, "It's a good gate." "Yeah," I said, "it is." And as she drove away without another word, I realized something strange. For all the chaos, the shouting, the police reports, the sleepless nights, maybe this whole ordeal had been worth it. Because now Maple Ridge was peaceful again. And the gate that started it all was stronger than ever. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about restoring balance. And that day, as the last light faded behind the hills, balance finally returned. The following week, things in Maple Ridge Estates finally began to feel normal again, or at least as normal as they could be, after the most dramatic HOA meltdown in county history. The chatter on Facebook had died down, the patrol lights no longer flashed on my dirt road at midnight, and for the first time in months, the air around the farm felt light again. Still, I couldn't help but smile every time I looked at that old wooden gate. It had become something of a local landmark. People would drive by just to see at the gate that outlasted the HOA president who tried to tear it down. One of my deputies even started calling it the Gate of Justice. The nickname stuck. A few days later, the county court clerk called to let me know the hearing against Karen was officially closed. She'd accepted full responsibility and completed her first week of community service without incident. Apparently, she was volunteering at the local animal shelter, scooping kennels instead of writing citations. Irony has a way of finding the perfect job for people, but even with her gone, there were still ripples to deal with. The HOA board was now under county review for financial misconduct, since it turned out Karen had been using community funds to pay for those fake inspections. The investigation revealed a trail of receipts payments to a bogus contracting firm she'd created herself, Whitmore Property Management, that billed the HOA for work that never happened. When the auditor handed me the report, I had to laugh. "You mean she fined people for having the wrong mailbox paint while she was running a shell company?" He nodded grimly. "It's worse. She charged the HOA for consulting fees every month, $2,400 a pop." Sarah nearly dropped her coffee when I told her. That woman was out here policing lawn ornaments while embezzling her neighbors. "Yep," I said, shaking my head, and she still thought she could outsmart a sheriff. It took less than a week for the county to freeze the HOA's accounts. The residents voted to dissolve the old board entirely and form a new one, smaller, transparent, and with a lot less power. Janet, the new president, made sure of that. At the next community meeting, she asked me to attend. "Not as sheriff," she said, "just as a neighbor." When I arrived at the Maple Ridge clubhouse, the crowd actually clapped. Someone had baked cookies, shaped like little gates, half joke, half tribute. I took a seat in the back, and Janet started the meeting with a smile. "Folks, I think we've all learned a valuable lesson these past few months," she said. "This neighborhood isn't a kingdom, and the HOA isn't the law. We're supposed to protect our community, not control it." Everyone applauded, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen here in years: unity. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached me one by one. "Sheriff, thanks for standing your ground. You showed us that we don't have to be afraid of her anymore. You know this place finally feels like home again." Those words meant more to me than any commendation I'd ever received in uniform. Later that evening, back at the ranch, I walked out to the gate as the sun dipped low over the hills. The air smelled of pine and warm dust, and the wooden beams glowed orange in the dying light. I reached out and ran my hand along the smooth surface, sturdy, weathered, unyielding. My father used to tell me that a man's gate was more than just an entrance, it was a promise. A promise that what lay beyond it was earned, guarded, and respected. Karen had tried to tear that promise down, but in doing so, she'd reminded the whole community what integrity looked like. A few days later, I got an unexpected letter in the mail. No envelope, just folded paper with my name written in a shaky hand. Inside was a short note: "Sheriff Whitaker, I wanted to thank you for not pressing harder. I was angry at first, but I see now that you were right. I let pride get in the way of reason. The shelter work has been humbling. The animals don't care who I was, only how I treat them now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say thank you for reminding me that authority doesn't mean control. It means responsibility. Karen W." I stared at the letter for a long time before setting it down on my desk. It was the first genuine thing I'd ever read from her. Sarah walked in, drying her hands on a towel. "Who's that from? Someone learning what real leadership means," I said quietly. She smiled. "Think she'll ever come around again, maybe," I said. "But next time, I hope it's to drop off cookies instead of complaints." A week passed without incident. The HOA stayed quiet, and the county report eventually cleared me of any conflict of interest in the dispute. The newspapers printed a small piece titled, "Sheriff Teaches HOA a Lesson in the Law." It was meant as a puff story, but I didn't mind. What mattered most was peace. Real, tangible peace. One morning, while checking the fence line, I saw a few of the kids from Maple Ridge riding their bikes near the road. They stopped to wave. "Hi, Sheriff," I waved back. "You kids behaving yourselves," one boy grinned. "Yeah, Mrs. Janet says we can paint our mailboxes whatever color we want now," I laughed. "That's progress." Sarah leaned against the porch railing, watching them ride off. "It's funny," she said. "You spent your whole career keeping the peace in the county, but it took one HOA to test your patience more than any criminal ever did." "Criminals are predictable," I said. Karen wasn't. She laughed. "You think she's changed?" I looked out toward the road where the wind swayed the private easement sign back and forth. "Maybe not completely," I said. "But I think she finally learned that fences and rules only work when they're built on respect, not ego." That evening, the sky burned orange again, the same color as the day it all started. I stood by the gate, one hand resting on the wood, the other holding a coffee mug, and I thought about how quiet everything was. No sirens, no shouting, just peace. After everything, I realized this wasn't just a story about a farm gate or an HOA war. It was about boundaries, not just physical ones, but moral ones. About knowing when to stand your ground and when to let people learn from their mistakes. Justice, I thought, isn't about power. It's about balance. As the stars began to flicker overhead, I walked back to the porch where Sarah waited. So she said, smiling, "What now, Sheriff?" I looked over my shoulder at the gate, one last time solid and unbroken, framed by the last streaks of twilight. "Now," I said, "we finally rest easy. In life, it's easy to mistake authority for power and power for control. But true strength isn't about forcing people to obey, it's about earning their respect through fairness, patience, and courage. Whether you're a sheriff, a neighbor, or just someone protecting what's yours, remember, this integrity will always outlast arrogance." Sometimes standing your ground isn't about fighting, it's about staying calm while the storm destroys itself. So if you've ever dealt with a Karen in your life, take a breath, hold your ground, and let time and truth do their work. If this story made you smile or think, drop a comment below, telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more HOA stories of karma, justice, and redemption.